after 6. So Ron, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. Good evening. This is Ron Hennigan, Director of Education at CSC. Welcome back. Tonight, we're pleased that Vince Eisenson, who's been a company member for CSC for several years, has agreed to join us, and for a little bit of a deep dive specifically on sort of the character of Hamlet and sort of Vince's way of finding himself in the play. Vince, when you and Brendan and I and Gerard talked last week, we talked a little bit about some things that Brendan will be featuring when he's here next week to discuss his sort of concept in terms of, diving into the play and his expectation of it. So I know tonight, I know you'll be sharing a little bit of what your experience in preparing to play the role has been. But I guess more than that, I just want to say thank you for joining us and sharing with us. And for everybody here, if there's questions that you have throughout the week, by all means, we could start to accumulate those, so you could send them to myself or Gerard in anticipation for Brendan being here next week. And Brendan is we're all trying to kind of map out a little bit of territory. And so Brendan wanted to feature specifically you're working on the play at CSC. But I'll let Vince have the floor. And if you need anything, you can message me, and I'll just be listening in as we go tonight. So Vince Eisenson, everybody, clap your virtual hands. There you go.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for being here. So I was able to watch the last 2 classes. I couldn't attend live because I think they were sold out. But I was able to watch them, and it was very illuminating. And I think Gerard did a great job of getting everybody started on this. And the way I kind of wanted to approach the class is more or less what Ron just said. However, while I'll definitely share some of my insights and some of the discoveries I've already made, I would love to hear yours as well. And we're going to focus on more than just Hamlet. Obviously, he's got the most lines. He is the title character. But I've already assigned some reading selections to a few participants here. And we're going to look at, I'd say, half a dozen major characters. But as we go, since we can't hit every scene and can't hit every line, I kind of wish we could, but we could spend 2 hours on one scene, to be honest. So I'm going to try to hit some highlights. But as we're going, if there is a scene that you really want to talk about, or you think I glossed over, please raise your hand. I would love you to chime in, and maybe we could even go to a specific line. I'll have the text up on the share screen a lot. So if you want to reference a line, I'll be using the Folger text that we're all using. So my MO tonight is kind of to take you through this the way I think an actor would approach it, and I am the actor playing Hamlet, so this is how I'm approaching it. As a detective, more or less. I kind of have always thought what makes this play work is that it is ultimately a mystery. It's a detective play. It's about people trying to figure out what the hell is going on and what they should do about it. And an annoying thing for me, this is the first time I've played Hamlet, but an annoying thing for me is when someone goes, "Oh, I hate Hamlet. It's the play about the guy who can't make any decisions." I mean, when was the last time your uncle murdered your father and you found out about it via a ghostly visitation? Have you been in that position? Because I haven't. So we're not picking jelly at the grocery store, which now sadly could be a matter of life and death. But these are some pretty big decisions that are having to be made here. And I think there's a lot of detective work that has to happen, a lot of discoveries that have to be made. So we'll kind of go through some scenes and maybe, if we can, approach it as somebody who's only read it once or never read it or never seen it. Because, Shakespeare might not have known this would be the 420th year that the play was being performed, God willing. So with that nice preamble, I wanted to open something up to you all. Having read the play now, specifically the second half, were there any new discoveries you made, or if it was your first time, any things that really just stood out to you, any big overall takeaways about the play from basically where we left off last week to the end? If anyone wants to weigh in, now's a good time. I see a hand raised. Howard, yes.
I really loved the relationship between Hamlet and Horatio. I found that deeper and more interesting than I had before. It didn't actually make me love Horatio anymore, but the relationship between these two guys, two men, was really wonderful. I thought, especially that scene where he talks about cleaving him to his heart, or I don't have the exact line, but how wonderful Horatio is. Maybe it's because I miss my friends, my male friends right now, but I found that the relationship between the two of them to be wonderful and deep.
Thanks, Howard. Thank you very much. And I actually, you reminded me of something that I kind of meant to say up front, which was that we did get a week of rehearsal in, and honestly, the director and I were able to talk a lot before that. So I have a good sense of the direction this particular production's going, and I don't want to spoil all of that because you guys are going to meet with the director, I think in 2 weeks, or maybe next week. I think it's next week. And I'm going to let him do some of that. But there are some things about our production that are different. One being that Horatio is played by a woman. So boom, bombshell there for you. But as actors,
No. Yeah.
yeah. But that's okay. And we could spend 2 hours just talking about what that means for Hamlet to say those things to a woman, which he says.
Yeah,
like,
I saw a production of Hamlet where Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were women. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's fairly common to do a guy and a girl for those parts, or to kind of mess around with that. We do have a male and a female identifying actors playing both parts. So the play has a lot of interesting gender things. But again, I'll leave some of that up to Brendan because that goes along more with his concept. And we could spend all night just talking about one scene. So anybody else want to weigh in? Thank you, Howard. On initial impressions or things you never thought about when you saw it or read it before. Laura has something brewing in the, oh, Emily. Yes, Emily.
Laura's laughing at me. We're good friends, so she's laughing at her. One of the things that struck me, and this kind of struck me in almost every production that I've seen, is that I think it's easy, too often Hamlet is played by an older, middle-aged actor playing younger. And I think, at least for me, one of the important things with Hamlet to me, in some of his callousness towards Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and even Ophelia and his actions with Laertes, I think if you see him as a younger man, what he is, a college student, he's probably someone in his late teens, early 20s. I think so much of his attitude and his action versus inaction makes more sense when it's played by a younger actor. And you yourself look like a fairly young person. So.
Thank you, Emily. Move her to the front of the class. Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, Howard just mentioned everyone. He's 30, no? I will say, I don't think Shakespeare is often too terribly picky about ages, but if you want to look at the text and really try to nail it down, you could definitely argue that at the very end, he is identified by a possibly drunken gravedigger as being about 30. And we get that information, based on the memory of a guy who's been digging graves for several decades. We do know, I think what we know is he's old enough to have known Yorick the Jester, who's been dead for 23 years. So let's say throughout the play, Hamlet could easily be mid-20s up to 30. But the point I think you're making is that he is a younger guy who he's not married, doesn't have kids. He does, he hasn't necessarily lived a full life. And a lot of the decisions he makes may come from a place of emotional immaturity or just having been coddled his whole life. Because, come on. Prince of Denmark, it's probably not the hardest job in the world. Yeah. Let's maybe get one or two other impressions, and then we're going to dive into Act 3, which is a beast of an act. And I am actually going to back up a little because I know even Gerard just covering the beginning, we didn't even really get into Act 3, which is one you got to talk about. So one or two more initial impressions.
I noticed something. I'm Zoe Landau. I noticed something that I hadn't noticed before is the king has these lengthy monologues about how everyone finds Hamlet so attractive, which earlier we talked about how he was apparently stout and short of breath. I don't remember the exact quote, but there was a whole thing about it. But the king is going on and on about, you know, how all these ladies love him, how apparently he's just like this shining, attractive man. And I just had never considered that before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think what you're referring to is when he says something along the lines of the general public really adore him or they think he's great. I don't know that anyone comes out and says ladies think he's very handsome. Maybe I missed it. But the point is he's admired by the public. He's probably liked for several qualities. I mean, he's a pretty smart guy. You see how thoroughly he can reason. But you're right. There is a line that says he's fat and scant of breath, which is often cut. Oh, thank you. I bet Ron is hunting down a quote here. Yes, he's fat and scant of breath. Thank you, Zoe. I've seen that cut. I've seen it change to he's hot and scant of breath. I've seen people bend over backwards to explain that as meaning he's very sweaty. It's up to you. I think if you did a production with a very rotund Hamlet, then great. Then you have that line to support you. It's perfect. But yeah, good observation there.
But I just wanted to add one more thing. I could be wrong about this, but he does say that women love him, right? Is line 20, Act 4, Scene 7, the great love the general gender bear him? Does that mean just like Hamlet is just loved by women?
I never took general gender to mean women, but now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it could. I just thought it meant everybody, like the general populace. But maybe you mean women. I hadn't thought of that, and now I'm thinking about it. We know at the very least. I mean, Ophelia likes him. I think he could get. You know, he doesn't talk about not being able to get a date, so most of his problems are created by other issues. Let's see, Sarah Marshall is going to weigh in. Gender means common people, yeah. So, fatuous, oh wow. Yeah, good stuff here. Power is a great aphrodisiac. Good point. Yeah, I think Claudia, we will get to that scene, and what I want to talk about there is how freaking smart Claudius is. Because I think if you look at this play, I know I said it was a detective story. I think it's as much a detective story from Claudius's end as it is from Hamlet's. And the second half of the play, it's almost like Claudius takes over. We see him, A, trying to figure out what this guy knows, B, how he knows, C, what he should do about it, D, how he can fix all these problems and still be king and still keep his wife. I mean, Claudius has so much to deal with in Act 2, or the second half, that it very much parallels all the things Hamlet's trying to figure out in the first half. And one more phrase I'm going to throw at you, this is Brendan's phrase, our director, is the short flashlight. I think this is a great image for any actor, but especially for a play like this. As you can probably guess, it alludes to you only see what's right in front of you. You may try to plan way ahead, but you're having to deal with what you're looking at right now. The detective enters the room. He can't have a full theory. He has to look at the bloodstains here first. Then he's got to move on to this. So the whole play very much has that energy, I think, of people dealing with what's right in front of them, trying to revise their plan accordingly and move forward. And if anyone were to sit down and really plan ahead, then, you know, it wouldn't be a tragedy. That's why these things are always tragic, because people don't sit down and just have a nice conversation. They're just trying to maneuver with the information as best they can. All right, let's look at 3-1, because you know, part of me wants to ignore it, but it's the most famous speech ever written, and it's always taken out of context. And I will say, Gerard mentioned this, that 3-1 or 3-2 could be the climax of the play. I think one argument you could make is the speech is the climax, even though it's presumably out of nowhere. And all it really does is raise a question. Before I talk too much about the speech, let's keep in mind what's just happened. The last time we saw Hamlet, he came up with a plan. Maybe not a great one, but it seems pretty good considering. He's going to put on this play. He's going to doctor the script a little bit, and he's going to see how his uncle reacts. If his uncle flips out, there is some earthly proof that he's a murderer. So I think the entire, rising action is this detective work of Hamlet trying to find out for sure if his uncle killed his father, because he can't really do anything until he's sure about that. You may argue he could just do it, but come on. I mean, it's your uncle. I mean, I don't know about you all. I have a couple uncles. I love them. I mean, Hamlet doesn't seem to love his too much, but it's still your uncle. I mean, that's like a very close relative. Anyway, so he comes on. To be or not to be, that is the question. I'm not going to read you the whole speech. Everybody knows it. All I'll say is this is often done as like a one-off where the guy comes on with a gun or a noose or a bottle of cyanide. And it's as if the entire point of the speech is, do I kill myself right now or not? I don't know that Shakespeare would spend this much time on that one question, especially since we've already heard him talk about suicide much earlier. So a few things to consider is that to be or not to be, what does that even mean? He doesn't say to kill myself or not to kill myself. He doesn't say to live or die. He says to be or not to be. It could mean to be content with what's happening. It could mean to fulfill your potential, to be king. It can mean a lot of things. I don't have the answers to this, but I will say, here's another spoiler for you. In our production, this speech does not happen right here. It happens somewhere else. So some people may have just left the room. I worked with a teacher once who said, if you move that speech from 3-1, I'll leave the theater. So I will say it happens somewhere else in our production, and it does, for me, clear up what the speech is about. It's not simply saying, should I kill myself or shouldn't I? I mean, that's clearly in the guy's brain, but he has to know that if you do kill the king, the overwhelming odds are that you're going to die too, especially if you don't have proof. I mean, what does he have? The word of a ghost? And in the best case scenario, he's got the reaction of somebody at a play. So there's a lot to wrestle with here. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but if anyone, yes, Rhina raised her hand. Please weigh in, Rhina, and save me here. Sorry, I'm going to move to seeing Rhina. No. Rhina, go ahead. I'm sorry. I muted you. There, I'm going to unmute you. Rhina?
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm having
yes, now I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I was just going to ask, sometimes I've seen this play performed where the soliloquies are all done out of order. And I want to know what your feeling is about that.
That's a great question. I've seen that done too. I think the last production I was a part of, I wasn't Hamlet, I was just an understudy, but it opened with, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt. I get that because that speech kind of sums up the backstory. So for an audience that could be useful. Personally, I'm glad ours doesn't do that. I actually think that speech in particular is very contextual, and it's a direct response to what Claudius just said. He just said, basically, let's go drink, let's go carouse, let's go celebrate, let's send up our shouts to the heavens, and then the heavens can send back their admiration, something along those lines. He even says the word canon, to which Hamlet then responds, basically, I wish my body would melt and evaporate and go up to heaven. But God's not cool with that. His canon uses the different meaning of, or a different spelling and meaning of canon. But the point is, he's directly referencing what was just said. And you know, there's the short flashlight thing. Respond to what just happened. This isn't like a bunch of isolated speeches, with the exception being to be or not to be, which kind of seems to come out of nowhere, which is why I think if you're going to move one of them, that might be the one to move, because it kind of comes out of nowhere. And you could argue the whole thing is a total bullshit set piece because he knows people are spying on him. Anyway, who's, somebody has their hand raised here.
John?
Yes, John, go ahead.
Hey, it just always struck me that the way that one line is structured, it puts question, the word question, that with the last syllable in that weak phrase, weak syllable. And so you wind up having not to be, that is the quest. And so it's almost as if he thinks something else. If I were to be something, no, wait, let me think about that again. Not that I'm committing suicide, not that I'm thinking about suicide, but I know that ultimately my goal, where I'm going in reality is not to be, that's the quest of what's going to happen. And he achieves that in the fifth act.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, because not to be is actually something you have to do. If you just be, you're just chilling. You're accepting things. But if you're not gonna be, then you have to do something else. So it could be kill yourself, or it could be going to kill the king. It's
and that first part could be actually a completely different thought. I was gonna go maybe celebrate, to be a crazy prince or to do something else. I don't know. But wait, not to be. I know that's where I'm going eventually. That's where we're all going eventually.
And of course, we may not get to it, but in Act 5, when he's talking to Horatio, one of the last things he says is, let be, which is almost, you got to think that's a response to his earlier thinking, which is like, maybe I just need to let this thing play out the way it's going to play out. And he does, and he dies, but everybody dies. It kind of works out when he stops trying to control the situation and lets divinity have a hand in it. And of course, later we hear him talk about how much divinity does have a hand. You can try to plan things, you have to try, but ultimately it's going to be shaped by divinity. Some lucky deus ex machina, something's going to put the finishing touches on your plan. Yeah. So we haven't even started the second half yet. There's so much here, so much here. I would love to look at 3-2, because that's where we were technically supposed to start. And I have some actors who are going to help us here. So we're going to look at Hamlet and the first player, part of his instructions to the player. And that's in 3-2. It's going to be lines 17 through 47, and I'll pop those up there so you can see them. But this is 3-2, lines 17 through 47, with Jocelyn. Jocelyn.
Me.
Yeah, hey, Josie.
Hi.
Yeah, Josie's going to read Hamlet for us.
Yes.
And Jonna's going to chime in as the first player, who doesn't have a lot to do here, but we'll get some more Jonna later. So
Hello.
So I think let's try it for this first one. I'll put the text up and so you guys can follow along if you don't have it in front of you. Let's see, 3-2. Whoops. Line 17. Woo. Yes, I am skipping over the Hamlet and Ophelia scene, which we could spend all day on too. All right, let's see. Here we go. So Hamlet has already come in and kind of started giving some instructions to the player. And I know I talked about this with the director. It's one of those famous speeches, again, where you're giving an actor a bunch of advice. But one thing to consider is, like, why is he giving them this advice right now? I mean, he talked about how great they were. So obviously he already respects them as actors. He's not just like hired 3 people off the street and trying to teach them how to act. So we kind of toyed around with the idea of this goes without saying, but, you know, when you're giving notes, you know, people know, but you really want to hammer it home because, well, maybe there's an important performance coming up. Anyway, let's let Josie and Jonna weigh in, starting at line 17 with "Be not too tame neither."
Be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action. With this special observance you overstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so done is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at first and now, was and is to hold, as 'twere the mirror up to nature, to show her virtue her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of time his form and pressure. Now this overdone or come tardy off, through it makes the unskillful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of the which one must in your allowance or away, a whole theatre of others. Oh, there be players that I have seen play and heard others praise, and that highly, not to speak of it profane, that neither having the accent of Christians nor the gait of a Christian, pagan, nor man, have so strutted and bellowed that I have thought of some of nature's journeymen had made men, and not made them well. They imitated humanity so abominably.
I hope we have reformed that indifferently with us, sir.
Oh, reform it altogether, and let those play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them, for there be of some them that will themselves laugh, to set on some quantity of barren spectators to laugh too, though in the meantime some necessary question of the play be then to be considered. That's villainous, and shows a most pitiful ambition in the fool that uses it. Go, make you ready.
Thank you very much, actors. Thank you for that. So I'll ask the actors first. You've never read this play. You've never seen it done. What are your thoughts right here? Why is he saying all this stuff?
I thought it was very interesting because, as you said, it was the kind of reiteration. Like, I thought it was really interesting because Hamlet has planned this out so specifically. He wants everything to go according to plan. So he's just taking every precaution, talking about every single detail to make sure nothing wrong happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's only going to get one shot at this. And let's be honest, it's not the world's best plan. I mean, but I think it's a fair one. It's a fair shot. I actually didn't see who just said that. So the other actor, did you have any thoughts there?
Yes, it also raises a major red flag to the players that something unusual is going on. This isn't their typical trade. It's not the typical way to just earn coin and earn money for the night. There's something deeper here, but they don't have all the information behind why it's so important. So it might freak them out a little bit to get this much instruction.
That's a great point. I mean, I find in a scene, it's almost always harder to be the person who doesn't have a lot of lines because, I mean, yeah, when you have the lines, you kind of know what to do because you can act what you're saying. But when you're listening, that can be tough. And that's a very active way, I think, to do it, is like really trying to piece together the instructions and maybe trying to figure out why you're getting all these specific instructions. I just noticed, for example, around line 27, though it makes the unskillful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of the which one must in your allowance o'erweigh a whole theatre of others. I mean, who's the one? It's Claudius, yeah. He doesn't say it, but he almost says, like, you know what? If only one person gets this, that's all I need. And the player might be wondering, who are we doing this for? As you just said, like, which is this one person that's so important that we don't even care about the rest of the audience? We just want this one person to really get it. And I'll mention a point Ron brought up to me when we were talking about this, is some of these speeches, you know, they're a little long. And Ron mentioned the fact that maybe at some point, you know, an actor might have started adding a few lines, saying, hey, what if we added this? What if we? So I think that's possible. In our production, some of this is cut. I don't think we need all the Christian pagan stuff here, and that is cut in our production. Doesn't really seem to help his point too much, though I'm sure you could make a counter argument for that. What was the last thing? Oh, the clowns. While that is funny, I think that's important too, because the worst thing that could happen is we get to the crucial scene and somebody ad-libs. And we all look to see the guy goofing around over there in the corner and laugh at that. And we just missed the line that was supposed to trigger Claudius. I think we've all been in productions where that happens. I've been in those productions where actually a very important plot point is missed because people are looking over at the guy over there who's doing something goofy. It may be hilarious, but we just missed the point of the scene. Okay, it is 6:30. We're gonna move forward. I would love to just see a little bit of the scene. If we could move to, no one volunteered to read this, by the way. So I got a bunch of readers, but there are some volunteers I would gladly take. If we want to look at later in the scene when Hamlet and Lucianus, well, Lucianus is doing his bit and Hamlet is kind of weighing in. So this is lines 276 to 290 in the same scene. I'll put it up real quick. Whew. Again, what an absolute bear of a scene. I mean, we have him prepping the actors and Ophelia and all these people and the play itself all happening in one dang scene. I mean, it's a massive monster of a scene. So 276, finally, we're getting to it. So Hamlet and Ophelia have been chatting, sparring. We finally get to the murder. And I think this is part of the stuff that Hamlet wrote when he says, Howard's with me on that. I know he asked the player, hey, could you maybe memorize like 12 to 16 extra lines? I know Lucianus doesn't have 16 lines here, but I think you could argue that some of these lines were added by Hamlet. We'll see. We'll see when we read it. Can I get some volunteers to read? Oh, Katie Vaught, you are going to read Lucianus.
Okay.
And let's get a Hamlet. I see Kate Fortin's like hand in the air, but I think she's stretching.
Can I be Hamlet?
Who said, can I be Hamlet?
Zoe.
Go for
My
it, Zoe.
hand is
Okay.
raised. Oh, I would love to. All right,
So-
so I'm starting. So you mistake your husbands?
Yeah, let's go for that.
So you mistake your husbands. Begin, murderer. Pox, leave thy damnable faces and begin. Come, the croaking raven doth bellow for revenge.
Thoughts black, hands act, drugs fit and time agreeing. Confederate season else no creature seeing. Thou mixture rank of midnight weeds collected, when Hectate's band thrice blasted, thrice infected. Thy natural magic and dire property, on wholesome life usurp immediately.
He poisons him in the garden for his estate. His name's Gonzago. The story is extant and written in very choice Italian. You shall see anon how the murderer gets the love of Gonzago's wife.
Boom. And then we know Claudius rises, not because some editor just put that in there, but because Ophelia then says the king rises. So
What?
there's a pretty big clue there. Yeah, Shakespeare wanted to make sure there was no stage direction left unnoticed. So what did we notice there? Well, let's look at the Lucianus speech. I mean, just looking at that, do you think Hamlet wrote that, or that was already part of the play?
Can I answer?
Yeah, please, yes.
So it doesn't fit with the rest of the play, really. Like even the language in it there's something, there's almost like a disconnect there. So it feels like this is what Hamlet handed to the player saying here, you know, these are my extra lines that I want you to memorize, because everyone has time to do that. But so that would be my, first inclination is that, yes, this is what Hamlet wrote, not even looking at what it says, just the fact that it doesn't fit with what else is going on. Like the language doesn't fit.
Yeah, good thought there. I mean, we didn't look at the earlier scene, but there's a lot of bloviated bad poetry going on. This one's a little more aggressive. It's a little more active. Ron would probably know if it's the same rhyme scheme. I haven't thought of that. But I do know. Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
It's got a couple. It obviously starts the feminine ending at the beginning, but then you keep seeing it. Else no creature seeing, even collected, infected. and even proper T. So there are a bunch of 11 beats happening there.
Yeah, I think just the first line, look how aggressive. I mean, thoughts black, hands apt, drugs fit, and time agreeing. That's some rhetorical device I can't think of at the moment, but it certainly does not have a smooth iambic feel to it. It's very trochaic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And word choice wise, we got rank. We know Hamlet loves saying rank. We know he talks about weeds in his first speech. Infected, property, usurp. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of clues here. And then whoever read Hamlet, did you have a thought on that one? Who just read it?
Oh, I just thought he was being very just like excited. I mean, the way, I could be wrong because I've never actually played Hamlet, but I just feel like he's super psyched for this. He's like, finally, things are coming into place. My plan is happening. And he's still acting a little bit crazy. So maybe he's playing up this excitement and playing up how he's just so ready for this. And he's like jumping around a little bit, or like, look, he's poisoning him. His name's Gonzago, very choice Italian.
Yeah. Howard, you've had your hand up for a bit. Oh, sorry. Let me unmute you.
I've always liked to look for what those lines that Hamlet adds into the play are, and there's lots of ways to think about that. But I love the idea that Lucianus's lines are those lines, or some of them. I also noticed that the player queen's lines on line 205, although they're I guess perfect iambic, are they? The instances that second marriage move, pretty good to the instances that second marriage move. Yeah, right at the top of that page. They have a little bit of the same feel that Lucianus's lines have, somewhat. So I wonder if those aren't lines also. It's so direct to say, a second time I kill my husband dead when second husband kisses me in bed. I mean, it's so direct. Who would think that The Murder of Gonzago, the playwright, would have lines that relevant and that strong? So I sometimes think that those lines by the player queen and the lines of Lucianus are the ones that Hamlet sort of adds in. But it's pretty neat to think about that. Thoughts black, hands apt are Hamlet's words.
I think that's a great argument. And I think I've also heard it argued that blah, 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 blah. I don't remember the exact line, but some people think it's the lines about, oh, you'll forget all those promises you made. Once your first husband's dead, you're going to forget how much you love me, and you're going to be ready to, I think it's probably around here, 236. So think thou wilt no second husband wed, but die thy thoughts when thy first lord is dead. Could be something like that. It could be a couple lines here and there. Who actually knows? I mean, I'm playing Hamlet. I guess I'll probably decide at some point. But one benefit of quarantine is I get extra time to make those decisions. And we didn't even get to that scene in rehearsal yet. So I'm still figuring that stuff out. But the point is, as an actor, these are cool decisions you can make, and you shouldn't take things for granted. Speaking of which, somebody mentioned how excited Hamlet was, whoever was reading it. I'm sorry for forgetting names so quickly. It was either Katie or Josie. I think there's some traction to the idea that maybe it doesn't get the effect he thought it would. So Lucianus said these very biting lines. We see him pour the poison, and then there's maybe a moment where Hamlet's like, did you get it? And he didn't. So then he has to further explain. Let me show you what just happened, jackass. He poisoned someone so that he could be the king, and then later he marries that dude's wife. So he takes it to the extreme. And I think that, that's something for the actor playing Hamlet. It's something for Claudius too. I also think if this were to be his damning evidence in a court of law, it wouldn't be the best evidence, because it's like, dude, you just provoked the king to within an inch of his life. Of course he's going to stand up and react. I can't make that argument because I'm playing Hamlet, but I think there's an argument to be made from the other characters that it's not the best strategy. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, we're still in Act 3. Man, there is so much in Act 3. I think we can hit a little more. We're going to take a break around 7. And if we don't finish the play, that's fine. I think Act 3 is so rich that it's worth mining a little more gold here. And Howard has volunteered to read Hamlet in the Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, and Hamlet exchange. So if I have a Rosencrantz and a Guildenstern who want to volunteer, Kate Fortin, yes. Why don't you be Rosencrantz?
All right.
And then B. Fizzler says, I'm in. Maybe that's to me.
Ah, the B.
B. Fizzler, do you want to be Guildenstern? She's muted. Let's see. Unmute. B. Fizzler wants to be Guildenstern. Excellent. I'm going to turn it up a little. Cool.
Where do we
So
start?
I'll bring up the lines for everybody.
Thank
This
you.
is, just for context, this is right after.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up. Whoops.
Okay, great.
Here we go. I'm going to bring up the lines for us. So again, we're still, believe it or not, in the same scene, which is incredible here that all this is happening in one scene. Which I think, to go back to Gerard's question earlier about where the climax is, there's so much happening in the scene, it kind of feels like this has to be the climactic scene. I would argue, if I had to pick it now, the king reacting, Claudius reacting is the climax of the play. I know there's still so much to happen, but in terms of Hamlet trying to get what he needed, he just got it. In his loony mind, he just got what he needed. He got the proof. That's the climax. There's still so much to happen, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on where the climax is, because you could totally argue it happens later. Anyway, let's look at lines 354. Actually, we'll go back to 352. So Hamlet will start with, my mother, you say. So basically, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have just been sent from Gertrude to get Hamlet. He doesn't know that yet. All he knows is his mother wants something from him. So Howard will start with my mother, you say, and we'll run all the way down to line 402 when Polonius comes in.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
My mother, you say.
Then thus she says, your behavior hath struck her into amazement and admiration.
Oh, wonderful son that can so astonish a mother. But is there no sequel at the heels of this mother's admiration, in part?
She desires to speak with you in her closet ere you go to bed.
We shall obey, were she 10 times our mother. Have you any further trade with us?
My lord, you once did love me.
And do still by these pickers and stealers.
Good, my lord. What is your cause of distemper? You do surely bar the door open upon your own liberty if you deny your griefs to your friend.
Sir, I lack advancement.
How can that be when you have the voice of the king himself for your secession in Denmark?
Aye, sir, but while the grass grows, the proverb is something musty. Oh, the recorders! Oh, let me see one. To withdraw for you. Why do you go about to recover the wind of me, as you would drive me into a toil?
Oh, my lord, if my duty be too bold, my love is too unmannerly.
I do not well understand that. Will you play upon this pipe?
My lord, I cannot.
I pray you.
Believe me, I cannot.
I do beseech you.
I know no touch of it, my lord.
Well, it is as easy as lying. Give these ventages with your finger and thumb, give it breath with your mouth, and it will discourse most eloquent music. Look you, these are the stops.
But these I cannot command to any utterance of harmony. I have not the skill.
Why, look you now, how unworthy a thing you make of me. You would play upon me. You would seem to know my stops. You would pluck out the heart of my mystery. You would sound me from my lowest note to the top of my compass. And there is much music, excellent voice in this little organ, yet you cannot make it speak. Splud, do you think I am easier to be played on than a pipe? Call me what instrument you will, though you can fret me, you cannot play upon me.
Damn, that's a sick burn. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I want to hear the actors weigh in, but I will say the reason I picked this scene, A, it's just a really fun one, but I think it's often looked at as a victory lap for Hamlet. He just got what he wanted. He found out the information. Now it's just like, I'm going to zing people. I'm going to screw with my friends, whatever. Yeah. But you know what? That seems like a pretty simplified view of what's happening here. I think the detective story is still running. He still needs a lot of info, and he's trying to get it out of these guys, his friends. You know, tell me what is happening. You asked me to go see my mother. Why? Is there something in there I should be worried about? He gives them a lot of chances to come clean here, and they don't take it. Did any of those actors want to weigh in? Or did I just blow it by saying all that? Let's see. Oh, sorry. P.S. Fortin, let me unmute you. Unmute. Wait, Kate. Wait, you're still muted.
You kind of hit upon all the things that I feel about that scene, so I don't have anything intelligent to put on top of that.
Well, let me ask, because you just read it. I mean, what does it feel like when you're having that? What does it feel like to be on the end of all that? To have all those things coming at you?
It's like he's playing a game, but I didn't sign up for it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't know the rules to the game that he's playing.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, we talk about how those two characters, they do kind of sign up for something. The king kind of
sure
gets them on board, but they might not really even understand the game they're being forced to play either. So they're in a tough spot. B. Fizzler, what do you think?
It's you. Hey, want to come hang out with your friend from college? Oh, by the way, you're kind of good in his death. Yeah.
I heard friend and death from Zoe. There was a bit of a...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I think I know what you mean, though.
This guy, this incredibly powerful guy is like, hey, you want to come hang out with your friend from college? Oh, by the way, you're going to be complacent in his death.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that I always think Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are not from Wittenberg, but from high school or younger than that. That's my sense of who these guys are, or friends are. Just because they're the only two people we see from Wittenberg are Hamlet and Horatio, and they're pretty smart. And Guildenstern and Rosencrantz are pretty dumb in that sense, and they don't know how sharp Hamlet is. They keep playing with him, and he is so far superior to them in this. He kills them. Like out of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. He kills them literally in this. But he's so far over them. You know.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I do think, and I have a few more RNG scenes because I really like tracking this.
Yeah.
How many opportunities he gives them to either to come clean or to leave. I think he warns them many times that what they're doing is not good for them. And you see, I feel like there may be a tension for the actor, and I'm going to have to find this, the tension of whether to tell them. He obviously told Horatio, so Horatio saw a lot of it, so he had to tell him. But, you know, he comes this close to just telling them, but he has to dance around that. I do think there's more to play as the actor with A, trying to get information from them, and B, trying to help them or trying to get them on his side. I think if you just decide Hamlet's going to be a dick to RNG, then you have an hour and a half of Hamlet being a dick to these guys, which that's one way to play it. I don't think it's the most interesting way.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Rhina, you had something there.
Yeah, I'm always split about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, about what to think about them. But what I come back to over and over again is what a tough position they're in. You know, if the King of Denmark sends for you and asks you to do him a favor, Not that he's the godfather, but he's pretty close to the godfather. And so what are you supposed to say? Are you supposed to say, nah, Claudius, I don't want to do that because Hamlet's my friend? Or are you going to do what your king commands you? I guess it depends on what view we have of kingship.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you know, if Hamlet does think he should be the rightful king, then it's kind of like, well, if you want to listen to the correct king, you should listen to me. But, and he even starts to allude to that. I think in the scene we just read, he said, what's bothering me? My ambition. Or I lack advancement. I lack advancement. So he kind of gets very close to spilling the beans. I mean, you could argue he's just giving them the answer that he thinks they expect. But I mean, he says it like, let's find it. Where was it? He says, I lack advancement. So, you know, let's take that somewhat at face value. Why am I upset? I should be king right now. I think that's a bigger question to ask for the actor playing Hamlet. Is your entire journey about seizing the throne that you are owed? I think there's a lot more to it than that, but I do think that's worth considering, that's a big part of it, that he's been denied what is rightfully his. That was a long scene. Anyone else want to weigh in on that before we leave this scene? Yeah.
Sure. It always struck me as really weird that the last line before the line that seems to set him off is, how can that be when you have the voice of the king himself for your succession in Denmark? And it's always struck me as, you know, why that leads to the whole stop toying with me, I know what you're doing. But just now, after all that conversation, I think it might be because when Rosencrantz says that, he gives information that he shouldn't necessarily have, like, and he gives it way too quickly, right? If he's just like a low-ranking person who's only recently come back to court, he shouldn't necessarily know what the current state of the succession is if it's elective. And then, I don't know, it seems like, in that context, that might make it glaringly obvious that they're having close contact with the king, which, you know, is not something they're supposed to let him know in this situation. I don't know.
Yeah, Martine, thank you, man. That's actually a great point I hadn't thought of, because I know Claudius says it earlier. I think he says, can't remember the exact line, but he says, our son, our heir, something to the effect of, yo, Hamlet, if you're on my team, it's going to work out for you. I'll make you my heir. But as Martine, I think, just pointed out, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were not there when that happened. So now there's the new information. How did you fuckers, excuse my language, how did you guys know that? I think that's a very valid thing to listen to. That's why it's good to listen to what the other actors are saying. But also, we do have a player entering with the recorders, so there's a nice excuse to suddenly be like, oh, the recorders. Let's see what Ryan is saying to everyone. Ryan, did you have something there? I think I lost it.
Yeah, she's actually put it in the chat, and it's at the beginning of the scene with Claudius where he says, well, let the world take note. You are the most immediate to our throne.
Yeah, that's in scene 2, right? Of the whole Act 1, Scene 2?
Right. I was going back to Act 1, Scene 2, as to kind of where Hamlet stands. Claudius is pretty much putting him in his place, I think, in that great speech that he gives, you know, in Dirge and Funeral, Mirth with Marriage, you know, all of that sort of thing. When he turns to Hamlet, solidly putting Hamlet off to the side as next in line, because he's just stepped into that role, that he wanted to make that public show that Hamlet is not the king, but the next king.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, he does immediately respond to the whole, well, why the grass grows, like, you know, this is getting old. I'm sitting here dying, waiting for this to happen. But there's a lot of traction to that being new information. So thank you, Martine. I never thought of that. That's why I'm doing this. So I can selfishly steal your ideas, people. All right, we completed Act 3, Scene 2, which is just a bear of a scene. I think it is the climax, so I'm glad we spent a lot of time on it. I think we should do our intermission now. And I promise the other scenes only have like a little bit, but we'll at least get through Act 4, I think. Ron Hennigan, I know, wanted to use intermission as a... Ron, what do you want to do?
Thank you, Vince. Hey, good evening. Yeah, so let's take, if you need to get up and move around or fix yourself a beverage, by all means, whatever it is you need, we'll take 5 at this time. I was just going to use the time in the meantime, if there were people that had questions about anything education. We've got a couple things that are going to be happening this week. I wanted to let some of you all know because we've got some teachers in the house. First thing you should know is that since we canceled our Romeo and Juliet matinees this past spring, I think we only had 3 or 4 performances of the show. That means we probably lost about 35 performances total of Romeo and Juliet. And it looks like, well, we won't be able to perform the matinees for Hamlet, because if Hamlet were to get started, even in late May, no one could do a field trip then anyway. So we've lost all of our matinees for the remainder of the year. We're touching base with a lot of teachers, some of whom are on this call, about ways that we can help them and their students going forward, since a lot of them are studying Romeo and Juliet, specifically in the spring. So just so you know, we're going to roll out a couple things this week. First of which is that we're going to share our 2017 Romeo and Juliet student matinee. We took an archival video of the show, and the audio is pretty good, and the sound is pretty good too. And so we're going to share that with all of those teachers, and then let them sort of follow suit in how they would deliver that with their students. So that's one thing we're going to be doing. And then we're working actually with several teachers about how they're teaching the different acts or different portions of the play when it comes to characterization, when it comes to language, or if they have to do specific units about Shakespeare history. We're trying to assist the teachers with some online content that'll help them. And also just maybe introduce the company to not only young people, but also just to be a good resource for our teachers, be sort of a good community member, if you will. So those things are happening. In addition, I guess we're also, we're weighing how we go forward in terms of some online things. We've been doing a couple of projects, performance. Our veterans group has been meeting on their own on Tuesdays and Thursdays, through Zoom. And then our program that we're doing down at through the Stephen A. Cohen Clinic down in Silver Spring, the military family clinic there, in association with our friends at Walter Reed. That project will finish up later this month, and we'll have some sort of culminating event online with veterans and some actives doing Shakespeare scenes that feature strong women characters. Because in Maryland, 2020 is the year of the woman, in case you didn't know that. And so that's our theme, and so that'll be coming up. Probably, we'll have some online content available at the beginning of May. So that's some stuff that's going on. If you have thoughts or questions or ideas about things, go ahead and you could ping me at hennigan@chesapeakeshakespeare.com. I'll put my email address here in the notes just so that you have it, but it's available through the website. Any questions while I'm on, just while we're still in our break here? I don't know, Margaret, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean, the demographics of this class?
What have you learned from who we all are? Where are we now, and maybe some of our background?
Oh, what have I learned about you all? Oh, this is interesting. Well, we haven't really measured you, to be honest with you. Thank you. That's a great question. We haven't really measured you. We haven't sent any assessment tools yet to you directly about your experience and who you are and what you are. I don't think we capture much data in the registration process other than where you live. So we know where you live, and we know how to reach you. But beyond that, I think that we're not learning too much other than we attract, the company itself attracts a really interesting mix of late 20, early 30 through mid 40, I think, is our largest demographic that attend the theater. But we've sort of known that we've skewed a little younger. We've known that for a little while. But no, we don't know too much about who our friends are online. So if you have a way of helping us discover who that is, then
I just wondering, what about locations?
oh gosh, oh that's a great question. That I don't know, but that's easy to get because we have your registration stuff. So how about that? I'll share that next week when Brendan's here. Any other questions for me?
Last week it looked like someone was on a sailboat.
I have a quick story. I have a student, a former student that I had when I was teaching at, I was teaching at a small college up in Pennsylvania. And Ryan was actually an actor in a couple of my shows and went on and you know, lived a life after college and ended up joining the Air Force and found out about our online class. And so he was acting last week. I had met him, 15 years ago when he was a student in college. And so he was with the Cohen Clinic last week doing a scene from Henry VI, Part 1, or excuse me, Henry VI, Part 3. So you never know. People come in and out of your life. Nancy says that she's zooming in from Los Angeles, so she gets the furthest bandwidth. Is that the right? That's not the right way to say that. The furthest bandwidth.
We had a Maine couple. I think it was, yeah, there we go, coming in from Maine.
Oh, we did, yeah. Do we have anybody from Florida? We have all points of the continental United States covered.
Oh, I also had a question about the Globe Theater and the plague. How did they carry on during the reoccurring illnesses that besieged London throughout their performance history?
I'll tell you one thing that they did that we don't, you know, it's a whole separate thing is that they still did private performances. Nobody talks about that. The theaters were closed, but if you had, if you were, you know, if you had a benefactor, if somebody, you know, if you were the Lord Chamberlain's men, then certainly there would probably be opportunities for you to perform, not in a public theater, however, in a private estate or a private theater. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some people made do under those arrangements. Obviously that's, we can't really do that as artists now, but I know that that's one thing that they did.
I'm going to respond to this North Carolinian here. I want to know where.
That's right, Vince is from North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, we'll let her decide where she's from. Cool. Thank you, Ron. Thank you for.
You're welcome, Vince.
Filling in there. I was very thirsty, which means I've been blabbing too much, and it's now time for someone else to talk. We're going to move on to 3-3, and Emily Hansen has volunteered to read us some Claudius. Before she does, I won't spill any of my thoughts, but I will just ask that you imagine for a moment that you're at the first table read of Hamlet ever. And let's say you're playing Claudius or you're just one of the other actors at the table. You don't know anything. That's all I'm going to say. So with that in mind, let me pull up the screen for Emily and for all of us. And let's hear what Claudius has to say when he is finally alone. Let's wait. I'm going to find it for you. Okay. Oh, by the way, he's just said, so he just told Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, you got to get rid of this guy. Take him to England. Polonius says, oh, well, let me go spy in his mom's room first, which we remember was the whole plan. I love how Polonius, by the way, sorry, I'll go back. I love how Polonius is still sticking to the original plan, despite this huge blow up that just happened at the play. The whole plan was, let's get Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to find out something. That didn't work. Let's get Ophelia to find out something from Hamlet. That didn't work. Okay, after the play, let's have his mother do it. Polonius is right back onto the plan. We're still going to get his mother to find something out. And Claudius is like, yeah, great. Let's do that. Great plan. And now he's finally alone. So, Emily, here you go.
Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Pray, can I not? Though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent, and like a man to double business bound, I stand in pause where I shall first begin, and both neglect. What if this cursed hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Whereto serves mercy but to confront the visages of offense? And what's in prayer but this twofold force, to be forestalled ere we come to fall, or pardoned being down? Then I'll look up, my fault is past. But oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? Thou cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder. My crown, mine own ambition, and my queen. May one be pardoned and retain the offense? In the corrupted currents of this world, offence's gilded hand may shove by justice, and oft 'tis seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law. But 'tis not so above. There is no shuffling. There the action lies in his true nature. And we ourselves compelled, even to the teeth and forehead of our faults, to give in evidence. What then? What rests? Try what repentance can. What can it not? Yet what can it, when one cannot repent? Oh, wretched state, oh, bosom black.
Oh, wait, Emily, I think we lost you.
Oh, am I not there? Can you hear me? Am I here?
What happened?
Hello? Am I here?
I can hear.
Oh, okay. Oh, should I just start again?
Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
O wretched state, O bosom black as death, O limed soul that struggling to be free art more engaged. Help, angels, make us say, bow stubborn knees and heart with strings of steel be soft as sinews of the newborn babe. All may be well. Ta-da.
I don't even know if Vince is still here.
Yeah.
He's totally frozen for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
That's all right.
I guess we'll
And
wait for
Rhina
him to
May
pop
says
back up.
yes, she can hear you. All right.
Has anybody seen the Shakespeare's Globe version of Hamlet that's now up on YouTube for free?
I saw it this morning on my recommended, and I don't know, I guess I'm like old-fashioned or whatever, but I always like my male Hamlet. So, I mean, I'm open to watching it, but it's definitely going to take some swallowing with a female Hamlet because I feel like that changes so much.
It's really interesting. Not only do they have a female Hamlet, but also a female Horatio and a male Ophelia.
Wait, really? That's really cool.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
I'm definitely going to make time to watch that.
Highly recommend it.
Thank
Has
you.
anybody else seen it?
Yeah, I think Michaela's saying she saw it.
Yeah, I thought there were too many distractors. And then I think Guildenstern is deaf mute, isn't he? It's just like too many gimmicks. Personal view.
I think you could say like maybe one thing where it was a little bit too much in some parts, but I think they made good use of it.
Okay, I think I asked Vince to come back to our meeting, so he might have unlogged, and then he's going to come back, hopefully. Michaela, you liked it? Best one you've ever seen?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her interpretation of to be or not to be. She like literally gives it directly to one person in the audience for a big chunk of the speech, and it's so interesting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And
Great. And then Howard, you saw it? And who else saw it? Anybody else?
I saw it, Richard. I saw it. Yeah, I saw the
Richard, you
first
saw it.
part. To be honest, I gave up because it annoyed me. once they Guildenstern was a deaf mute, I thought this is just too much. I can't cope with. I mean, it was clever, but it took away from me the main thrust of the play. I guess I'll try again.
Well, it's not punishment. I mean, we're not trying to, you know.
Yeah, if you want one version, David Tennant, that's the one, I think.
That's a good one too. That's a good one too.
I'm going to advocate for the Michael Urie at Shakespeare Theatre Company Hamlet, which I thought was just fantastic.
I sadly missed that one. I really wanted to see it, but I didn't get the tickets from the lottery. I lost it. Lost out.
Is there anywhere you can like watch that, even for a price? Because I missed that too, and I really was upset about missing that.
I don't know if the Washington Shakespeare Company puts any of their performances online.
I don't think so now, unfortunately. It was a great production though.
There was while we're waiting for Vince to come back on, I wanted to share with you guys a terrific teacher at Loyola University, Bob Miola. Is that coming up backwards?
Your voice is actually coming through twice for me, interestingly enough, because I think you have, that could just be me though.
No.
No, it's my apparatus.
Bob Miola is a teacher at Loyola University here in Baltimore. And his version is the Norton Critical Edition. And he's got some terrific, there's some terrific pieces in here that reference actually Sax Grammaticus that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, that brings in that Hamlet. And he's got he actually has an interview with David Tennant in here, as well as some other actors that played the role. So if you're interested, it's the second Norton Critical Edition of Hamlet, edited by Bob Miola here at Loyola University.
There was a Hamlet here in Baltimore that was a female Hamlet at Cohesion Theater with Caitlin Carbone. I don't know if anybody saw it. I thought it was really interesting. They did a grunge rock Oregon Hamlet. It was a couple of years ago. It was interesting.
Yeah, and Teresa's mentioned in the Globe Theater the full production that's up on YouTube as well, and she hasn't seen it. So we all have to make time in our very busy Zoom schedules to try to fit in some more, we have to find something else to do rather than be outside.
There's also the first season of Slings and Arrows, which takes on their production of Hamlet. The excellent Slings and Arrows. Which actually I think you can watch on, if you have a subscription to Acorn TV. You can see it online.
Hey, yes. So here's Vince Eisenson is back and has joined us again. Hey, Vince, welcome back.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out what happened here. But I don't know if I can share stuff on the screen, but I'm on my phone. Anyway, whoops. Oh, we have a power outage. That's what it is. Anyway, so Emily, thank you for reading the speech.
No problem.
Did we discuss it at all?
No, we kind of took a break.
Okay.
Not at all. I had nothing.
Nothing. No, that's fine. So, I mean, what a bombshell of a speech. I mean, if you could cut a lot from this play, but you couldn't really cut that, I don't think, because he just confessed to the audience. If he didn't, that's a very different play. If we never know if he did it or not, that's a totally different play. Sorry, my wife is letting me use her computer. Maybe that'll. I can't do that. Hold on. Very good. It's a very different play. And just side note, I heard recently when I was doing a little research that this was Abraham Lincoln's favorite speech in the play. which is, that's kind of cool, I think. And I agree. It's just such a, it's a great speech. B, it's such a, it turns everything on its head. It's a very Hamlet-like speech, and we're getting it from the guy who is supposedly the villain. Howard has his hand up. I want you to weigh in there, Howard.
Yeah, thanks. Just to say that on line 60 of that speech, or 59, I like the way Shakespeare puts these in order, and I think about these sometimes as the order in which Claudius was motivated to kill Hamlet Sr. He says, of those effects for which I did the murder, my crown, mine own ambition, and my queen. It seems to me that Shakespeare's clear and careful about that order. He could have put that in any number of orders, but I sort of see it as like 1, my crown, 2, my ambition, and 3, my queen. You might think that he killed Hamlet Sr. for Gertrude, but here I like reading this as he did it for the crown, he did it for the power, and the queen came along with that.
Oh, well, when you just said that, I took away the opposite interpretation, which was that my crown, my own ambition, and my queen, as if like it's a ladder and she's at the top of that ladder.
Right. There's that way to read it, that Shakespeare writes it, or Claudius says it from the lowest to the highest. Who knows? I read it the other way. I said, like, I think of it as 1, my crown, 2, my ambition, and 3, and my queen. But of course, you have to figure out. Oh no, you don't. Claudius does have to figure out like what's going on there.
Well, it is a rhetorical device, the use of a ladder, and I think it's kind of a microcosm of my whole point at the beginning, that the short flashlight and the detective work. I don't even know if Claudius has thought all the way through it. So you could argue he starts with the most pressing idea, or as he's thinking about it, he realizes why he did this. Or I like your afterthought idea, like, oh, yeah, I did it for her too. She's great.
Right.
That is very much up to the actor. The other thing is, if you follow it, he makes a lot of good points. What is the guy supposed to do now?
I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I think the interesting thing for me in reading it was that in some ways, and maybe this is just where my mind goes because of my profession, it's kind of a lawyer's speech, because he's talking about pardon and forgiveness and the law being bought out by, you can buy out the law by the proceeds of your crime,
Yeah.
Every mafioso don ever. And so to me, it's just, it's a lawyer's speech. Can I actually get forgiveness? Can I actually get pardoned for what I've done if I still have everything I did it for?
Yes. Yeah. And I think one more layer on that is what actually is the right thing to do here, because he is now the king. He is in charge of this country. Is he supposed to throw his country under the bus now? I mean, what is he supposed to do? I don't know. And then he tries to pray, and then he even admits prayer is not going to work here. So, I almost feel, by the end of this, I feel pretty bad for the guy, actually. I mean, he's in a bad position. And Hamlet may or may not hear some of what he actually said. That's up to the production, whether this is all in his head or not. But we do know Hamlet sees him praying there. And maybe his decision about what to do is swayed by how Claudius appears to be acting. I can't really.
What if there was a version of Hamlet? Sorry.
No, yeah.
I was just thinking, what if there was a version of Hamlet where this is what Hamlet thinks Claudius is saying, and so there's some sort of like sequence where the light changes or something, and you see Hamlet narrating as if he's saying the words that Claudius is saying, and then like it's Hamlet's imagination, and then we don't actually find out whether or not Claudius did it because he's not confessing. It's just like, oh, there he is. I bet he's thinking this, and then kind of like takes him up like a puppet and has him speak to the audience.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting take. And I think if you wanted a little textual support, it would be that Hamlet then proceeds to talk about how he can't kill somebody who's praying. Yeah, the whole play is Hamlet's imagination. We'll get to that. How he can't kill somebody who's praying, but then if you were listening to Claudius, he basically said, I can't pray. He doesn't really ever, he talks about praying, he kind of tries to do it, and then he basically says, I can't even pray, this is worthless. So you could argue Hamlet didn't hear it, because then he would know that it wasn't a prayer, it was just a meditation on whether one should or can even pray. Yeah. Sorry, I can't see anybody. Anybody else want to weigh in on that before we move on? Lloyd Eisenberg, maybe?
Can you hear me?
I can hear Lloyd, yeah.
Not on this one, I'll think about some others. I don't know the play as well as everybody else, but I love Shakespeare and I'm learning so much. So I'm a happy listener for now. Next week I'll try and talk a little more.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't mean to single you out, Lloyd. I just
No
saw you.
problem. You were just making sure I was awake. No problem. I enjoy it.
Cool. Well, I'm kind of at a disadvantage here. I'm doing it on my phone now, but luckily I did write out what scenes we're doing. So even though I can't pop them up there for you, I think we could move on to, to 3-4. I do want to see the Ghost and the Queen and Hamlet have a moment here. And I think this will really track what somebody just said about the whole thing being his imagination. So this one, I only have Jonna assigned to read Hamlet. This is Act 3, Scene 4, lines 118 to 159. Act 3, Scene 4, 118 to 159, with Jonna as Hamlet. If I could get some volunteers, Ghost and Queen, that would be great. Katie, I saw your hand. Katie, why don't you be the Queen? And then I see the number 2 for somebody else's hand. Howard, you can be the Ghost. There you go. So 118 to 159. Just a quick preamble here is this is a very long scene, which you could also argue is the climax, because things that happen in it are Hamlet confronts his mother. Hamlet maybe tries to get a confession out of his mother, maybe tries to figure out what she actually knows. Hamlet kills Polonius, who is behind him in the closet, or in the heiress. We all have an heiress, don't we? Yeah, so Polonius is back there and Hamlet kills him. And we could talk all day about why he does that. But I think without arguing too much about it, we can agree it's pretty impulsive. The text lets us know it happens very quickly. He may think it's the king. He may think it's a spy. He probably has a knife in his hand. And, these things are pretty clear in the text. Anyway, so all this stuff has happened, and then the Ghost is going to appear. I'll let you actors. Oh, thank you, Chesapeake Shakespeare, for sharing the screen. Whenever you're ready, actors. I don't even know who started.
Save me and hover o'er me with your wings, you heavenly guards. What would your gracious figure?
Alas, he's mad.
Do you not come your tardy son to chide that lapsed in time and passion lets go by the important acting of your dread command? Oh, say.
Do not forget, this visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose. But look, amazement on thy mother sits. Oh, step between her and her fighting soul, conceit in weakest body, strongest works. Speak to her, Hamlet.
How is it with you, lady?
Alas, how's it with you, that you do bend your eye on vacancy, and that the corporal air do hold discourse? Forth at your eyes your spirits wildly peep, and as the sleeping soldiers in alarm, your bedded hair like life in excrements, stand up and stand on in. O gentle sun, upon the heat and flame of thy distemper, sprinkle cool patience. Whereon do you look?
On him. On him, look you how pale he glares. His form and cause conjoined, preaching to stones would make them capable. Do not look upon me, lest with this piteous act you convert my stern effects. Then what I have to do will want true color, tears perchance for blood.
To whom do you speak this?
Do you see nothing there?
Nothing at all. Yet all that is I see.
Nor did you nothing hear?
No, nothing but ourselves.
Why, look you there, look how it steals away. My father in his habit as he lived. Look where he goes even now out at the portal.
this is the very cornage of your brain. This bodiless creation ecstasy is very cunning in.
And that's our end of the scene there.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ron, or whoever shared that. I assume it was Ron.
Yep.
Excellent. So just to tackle the first obvious thing, is this his imagination or not? You still could argue that because we just had another character who could corroborate this, and she obviously did not. She didn't see nothing. And you could argue Gertrude is such an amazing actress and has such presence of mind that she could fake not seeing any of that. I think that may be a stretch. You know, there's three reasons why. First of all, this is a ghost. We're suspending disbelief. No one here has ever seen a ghost that talked to them. If I'm wrong about that, go ahead and raise your hand and tell me I'm wrong. Sorry, I blocked the raise hand screen. Where are we? There we are. Oh, did someone raise their hand on that? No. So nobody's actually seen a ghost that talked to them. I do think it's new information for Hamlet. And I think as the actor, he has to make some decisions with that. If she didn't hear the ghost, that could mean I'm insane and this entire thing has been a bust. He doesn't appear to make that decision, but does he make any other decisions? I think it happens slightly later in the play. I mean, later in the scene, that he has to make some serious decisions. Well, one of them is he basically confesses to his mom that he's been pretending to be mad this whole time. So it's kind of a nice cover there. If I just acted insane now when I saw a ghost, let's say that was part of the act too. So once again, the madness excuse comes in very handy. And I think at other points in the play it does too. It's kind of the perfect coverall because whatever you're doing, you could always fall back on that excuse that you're crazy. But he comes clean and says, I'm not. This has all been an act. Please don't tell Dad. And Leslie, who's playing Gertrude, and doing a wonderful job, by the way. I hope you guys can come see it. This production will happen, but she's doing a great job in this role. And honestly, I mean, I think it's one of the best things I've ever seen her in. She's great in this. Don't tell her I said that. But there's so many discoveries in that scene. And the director and I and Leslie have kind of found ways to make it about the two of them coming together and I guess forming an alliance, but also, let me back up. Why did Hamlet even come in here? What does he ultimately want from this woman? Does anybody have a thought on that? Why we have this long ass scene and him coming in? Howard.
I think he wants her to both, well, see that she's done something that's terribly offensive. I mean, he starts this scene with that, thou hast my father, much offended. But also, I think he wants her to admit that she knows that she's involved in the killing of Hamlet Sr. Almost as bad, good mother, as kill a king and marry with your, you know, he lays that out, and you know she doesn't bite. But I think he wants her. I think he wants to align with her, and get her to admit that she was involved.
Great. And Emily, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think he, you know, as he says himself, he wants to wring her soul. I think he wants her to beg his forgiveness, if not his father's, you know, forgiveness for marrying Claudius. And I think in a way he does want to get his mother onto his team, onto Team Hamlet instead of Team Claudius. And I think he, in most productions I've seen, he does get that. He does get her onto Team Hamlet, and she doesn't ever in the play really seem the same with Claudius after this.
I agree. I agree. She does later basically say what she promises to do, which is not to rat out her own son. Because later in the scene, when Claudius comes in and asks what happened, she admits he killed Polonius. Like, that one is, there's no way around that one. But she also says that's part of his lunacy. I mean, he's crazy. So she doesn't spill any of the beans. She doesn't spill that he knows anything. And I think we still have the detective story happening here. Hamlet still doesn't know a lot. He doesn't know if his mother was involved. He doesn't know if she knew about it. I do think ultimately he does say, confess yourself to heaven. You know, it kind of reads like a confession scene, but in the end, he wants her to be saved. Sounds a little pompous when you put it that way, but like, Mom, at the very least, just, I don't want you to go to hell too. Because a lot of people are going to go to hell here, and I'd rather you not be one of them. Let's see, I agree with Ryan about the, oh, we have some climax talk. Let's see. Sorry, I think killing Polonius is the climax of the play for a few reasons. I'm going to put on a better light, but I want you guys to weigh in on that because I did want to talk about where the climax is. So those who think it's now, go ahead, let's hear you.
Well, I said I think it's the climax for a few reasons because to me, in the play, Hamlet is always, whenever he's worked himself into a passion, he brings himself back down to reason. And in this moment where Polonius is behind the arras, he doesn't have that opportunity to do that. And so then the different reasons that he's delaying are kind of out the window. You know, he didn't want to, the way I kind of look at it as he has a keen sense of what is just. And when we looked in the scene with the soliloquy of Claudius pretending to pray, we had Hamlet not just looking for revenge. He says that would be higher in salary, not justice. And so once he kills Polonius, there seems to be, to me at least, this recognition where he says, I will answer well the death I gave him. And up until then, you know, Hamlet hadn't done anything that he was going to have to answer for. And just projecting forward then to how this changes, he has in Act 4, this my thoughts be bloody kind of soliloquy. So for me, his attitude just sort of changes once he has made himself a murderer, when he's put himself on equal footing with Claudius.
Yeah, I missed the very end of that. Martine, do you want to weigh in there? Unmute you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, him having to possibly live with himself as a murderer now is pretty big for character development. And just from the point of view of the story of the tragedy, this whole time we've been wondering, is Hamlet going to avenge his father's death? The reason it gets to be such a long play is because there's complications to it. The first act, we pretty much learned that the two worst things that can happen are that Hamlet gets found out and Claudius kills him, or he's being misled and he kills an innocent man. And at this point in the show, he's killed an innocent man and Claudius has a reason to find him out and kill him. So like the worst things that can happen have happened, and he hasn't really been avenged yet. So it kind of like, it right now it looks like it's the least likely moment for him to successfully avenge his father. So as far as the drama goes, it's a climax for that reason.
Vince, are you there? I think our host may be frozen again. Hopefully Vince will be able to log back on. John, do you still have your hand up, or do you have anything else?
Yes,
Me, John? No, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I was just
John
going.
O'Leary, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add that it also goes with the tragic flaw that we discussed a few lessons ago, where it's ironic. This is the point in the show where Hamlet finally acts without thinking and debating or being indecisive for once, and it's the worst action he could have taken. And it's one of the few times in the show he just immediately acts without thinking.
I think one of the things that Vince mentioned that several of us were talking about before was because if the climax of the play was not only did we find out that Claudius actually committed the murder, but then he actually confessed it. So we learn not only, we learn by the content of the play, but then we also learn it after Claudius then confesses it, that Hamlet is now well armed to make the decision that we've all been waiting for him to make,